Thanks for watching HCAM. If you want to help create content like this, become an HCAM member. As a member, you'll have access to professional quality equipment and software, as well as guidance from HCAM staff. Come see us at 35 Pond Park Road, Suite 8, conveniently located near Route 3 and Derby Street in Hingham.
So welcome to Stewardship Saturday here at World's End. My name's Andrew. I'm a park ranger and biological science tech with the National Park Service. I'm joined here today by by Laura Kapler. I don't see where she is right now. She's somewhere around here. Oh, there's Laura. And Nate Wallace from the Trustees of Reservations, and Matt Slayton from the Trustees as well. We're fortunate to work here at World's End, usually during the wintertime for Stewardship Saturday, and happy to be here today on this chilly, but considering it's the end of January, relatively mild wintry day. Today we're hosting a Stewardship Saturday program at World's End. World's End is part of the national park here in Boston, the Boston Harbor Islands. It's owned by our trustees partners, and we're hosting a volunteer event that we bring in anywhere in the wintertime from 30 people coming to do habitat restoration projects, mainly controlling non-native invasive plants. Stewardship Saturdays happen year-round. Basically from April through November. They happen every single weekend with the exception of a few holidays. The rest of the year, December through March, they happen every other week. Stewardship Saturday is an opportunity for the public to come out into the park, a place that belongs to them, and contribute time and effort and energy to improving it. We have typically in parks, they're pretty small full-time staff, so we rely heavily on volunteers. The very first one actually happened here at World's End about 10 years ago. My supervisor starting it and running it, and it has grown in popularity and it's grown in frequency. So we have more and more volunteers coming out with regularity. We see the same faces over and over again, and then every week we see a bunch of new faces too, which is great. We definitely plan on continuing this into the future here at World's End and then throughout the rest of the Boston Harbor Islands. It's been a pretty successful program for us. Stewardship Saturday is our opportunity to get out in the park, to bring community into the park, and to try to make a difference and improve native biodiversity and natural habitat and natural processes in the park. The primary way we do that is by controlling non-native invasive plant species that are overtaking and overgrowing plant communities and habitats throughout the park. Here at World's End, probably the most biodiverse place of all the 34 properties within the national park at Boston Harbor Islands. Just such a beautiful landscape, really well maintained by the trustees, and we try to chip in when we can with this volunteer group. The Park Service here at the Harbor Islands, our role is to maintain, preserve, protect cultural sites, natural sites throughout the park. So there's 30 islands and 4 peninsulas that make up our park. There's over 13 different partners that help us run it, but the 2 big ones for us, or 3 big ones for us, are the Trustees of Reservations, the state and the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and Thompson Island Outward Bound. They really do a lot to on their island to help us run this program. So yeah, our primary project today will be heading over to an area of World's End called Rocky Neck. It's a beautiful red cedar woodland, and we're going to be controlling some non-native buckthorn and some other honeysuckle species over there. Yeah, I'm going to turn things over to Nate. He'll talk to you a little bit about this property specifically, about World's End.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so as Andrew said, I'm Nate Wallace. I'm the steward here. World's End, I think we can all agree, is an absolutely beautiful place. It's one of the best places on the South Shore, in my opinion. I'm a little biased. World's End has been part of the trustees' portfolio for 50 years. This is actually our 50th anniversary this year. Prior to being bought by the trustees, it used to be farmland. So this is designed property, all the carriage roads and tree lines. The setup of World's End was established by Frederick Law Olmsted. So it is a design landscape, although it does have many natural features. and we try to maintain it as Olmsted envisioned it as best we can. We have a pretty bare bones staff. It's myself and Wayne Shulo is the stewardship manager for both World's End. We also have 7 other properties in our portfolio that we take care of. It's about 1,500 acres of land. So obviously we very highly value all of you guys. We could not do as much as we do without your help, especially the National Park Service. We really rely heavily on volunteerism here. So on behalf of the trustees, I want to thank you all for showing up today. It is a little cold. Hopefully it'll get a little warmer before the end of the day. Yeah, that's really about it. If you guys have any questions throughout the day about World's End, maybe a little bit about the history of it, feel free to approach me or Andrew. I'd just say, please, everybody stay safe. If you get really cold, please let one of us know. If you get thirsty, etc. But I think we should all have a pretty good day today.
Great. Yeah. I know we're all starting to shiver a little bit standing still, so we'll talk a little bit more when we get to the work site. Typically at a Stewardship Saturday, we have our volunteers arrive around 9 o'clock in the morning, sometimes a little bit earlier, depending on if we're going to one of the islands, but today here at World's End, we'll be meeting them at 9 o'clock. We do a bit of a welcome circle. We try to get everyone to introduce themselves, and I kind of explain a little bit about the park to those that are new. We typically do a bit of a safety talk at the beginning of the day. We walk to our work site, identify the boundaries of that, identify the plants that we're going to be working with, reiterate some of the safety issues, and then we get to work. We usually work for a couple of hours and take a nice lunch break, chat. The staff with the Park Service takes turns baking cookies or some sort of snack each week, so that's usually a little bit of an incentive that volunteers get a kick out of. And then we resume work after lunch for about another hour or so, and usually wrap up our day at about 2:30. It's definitely a long-term planning process where we work with our partners here, the trustees, and other places in the park. It's the Department of Conservation and Recreation with the state, to identify projects that are important, basically habitat restoration projects and things that promote natural processes and native biodiversity. And so we look several months out and plan these events. Right now, I basically do all the planning for the event and am here during the event to see it through. I work with the partners to plan the dates, projects, and then set up the web applications that people interface with. I'm here to help guide our volunteers to work safely, be able to identify the target species that we're going to remove, and to kind of just talk a little bit about the biodiversity, talk about climate change, talk about all the important things that are happening here in the park and why we're here to protect it.
Part of the planning is we communicate regularly with the National Park Service, Andrew Petit-Mange, and we essentially try to work with the statewide ecology team with the trustees to establish where our problem spots are throughout the property. And we landed on Rocky Neck as our site today because of the high levels of invasives. It's a difficult place to maintain. So having many hands like we have today really improves our ability to monitor and eradicate invasives.
The projects that we have are usually focused on controlling non-native invasive plants, and that's usually through mechanical methods, which means pulling them out by the root, cutting them, and lopping them down. We have probably about 20 or 30 non-native species that are problematic, that edge out and can dominate sensitive habitats in the region, especially here in the park. And we do our best to teach our volunteers, teach them how to identify native and non-native plants, as well as use tools safely. I'm going to go through some tool safety, and I'm also want to point out the plants that we're going to go after. So first things first, the buckthorn, glossy buckthorn and common buckthorn. They're a little bit harder to identify now because they have no leaves, right? So I'll point out to you what they look like when we see them. We kind of weave our way back over the hilltop here where most of them are densely clustered. But what you're looking for are woody trees, basically. Typically most of them are going to be under 3 or 4 feet tall. The stems are going to be kind of an auburn to like light brown or dark, kind of rich brown color with really bright white spots all over it. And we'll try to differentiate that from any of the cherries that might be growing in here or anything like that. But glossy and common buckthorn really jump out at you, even in wintertime. There's also some bush honeysuckle back here, which is a really, really hard-wooded shrub. Most of the time, you're going to probably need a saw if it's any bigger than your thumb in diameter. But it has bark that is kind of peeling It looks almost like a grapevine, if you're familiar with what that looks like. And again, I'll try to point those out when we find them. There may be a little bit of Oriental bittersweet, which is a twisting vine, and some multiflora rose, which is a common, very thorny rose bush. All 4 of those species are the most common we're going to see out here, and all are non-native invasive plants that we're trying to remove from the landscape.
Well, buckthorn is not a bad plant from the standpoint it doesn't have thorns, it doesn't create rashes or poisons or anything like that. So it's not a bad plant from the standpoint it threatens us in any way, but it's what we call a monoculture. If we get one little buckthorn coming up here, it'll put out berries in the fall. And next year we'll have 2 little buckthorns coming up here. And then next year we'll have 4 and 8 and 16. And you know, when we get into this whole binary thing, and suddenly we have a buckthorn forest. And that's the problem. It chokes out and drives out the oaks or the red cedars that make this place, or give this little section out here of Rocky Neck its name, Red Cedar Forest.
I'm holding a pair of leather gloves. I want to see all of you wearing them when you're using the tools. You'll definitely want them if you run into anything with thorns, but you're going to want to wear it to keep your hands warm and yourself safe when sawing and lopping. Quick tool safety. If you're going to use hand pruners, I hope that you can use these holsters as well, so you can keep them secure on your waist. Couple of, if I can even get this out of there. This is safety, yeah. So these operate just like scissors, but a little more powerful. Basically, the rule that we try to enforce that we don't want you to cut anything that's bigger than the diameter of the handle of the tool that you're using. So if you see a branch or a twig that's actually I would go a good bit smaller than this before moving up to the next tool. So these, like I said, they operate just like scissors. They squeeze and spring back. There's a locking mechanism right here where your thumb might go. If you're right-handed, sorry for your lefties out there. So it's just a quick back and forth to unlock that. When you're using these and kind of talking with each other and appreciating the beautiful scenery, you would make sure you know where your other hand is when you're going to make a cut, because you might be grabbing a cluster of buckthorn or honeysuckle, and you don't want to accidentally nip your hand. If you're wearing leather gloves, you'll be safe. You still might startle yourself though, and we don't want to have anybody have any accidents. The next tool, if what you're cutting is a little bit bigger in diameter, we'll move up to loppers. These are small, short-handled. We also have some very long-handled loppers. They operate all the same. This is for things that are, say, an inch or so in diameter. Pretty good size little branches this can cut. All of these tools are very sharp. These ones are actually brand new, so they're super duper sharp, which means that they're actually safer to use. Insofar as it's going to cut better, so you're not going to have to put as much energy into it, which will alleviate you from making any kind of like slipping and fall and tripping and faltering with the tool. Yeah, just be mindful of where others. You're less likely to cut yourself. You're more likely to harm somebody else who's beside you. So if I was cutting next to Nate and I'm not paying attention, I could accidentally cut somebody's clothing or them. So be mindful of who's around you. Be aware of those around you at all times. We also have some saws. These are all super sharp, but they work really effectively at cutting the wood that we need to. So anything bigger than, say, an inch or two in diameter, you want to move up to a saw. If you're cutting, we want all the cuts to be down near the base of the plant and as level as possible with the ground. So really nice and flat. These cut on the backstroke, and you don't need to, despite your urge, you don't need to really go in it and saw as if you are the human chainsaw. You need to just get in there and make nice, even, slow motions, and it cuts on the backstroke, and you can just kind of gently push it forward and cuts on the backstroke. Be mindful, again, what you're cutting and how your body's positioned when you're cutting. Make sure if it's something that's kind of bouncing or loose or unstable, you're trying to stabilize it with the opposite foot or hand, so that when you're cutting, it's not jumping around on you. Make sure that what you're cutting, you know where it's going to fall before you cut it. Obviously, we're not going to be having you cut down anything big. You're not going to be cutting down any of these trees here, but some of the smaller things, they could be spring loaded. You don't want to have anything spring up and hit you or somebody else. So before you make any of your cuts, see if you notice any tension in the wood that you're going to cut. And if you're not sure, ask somebody next to you. And if they're not sure, ask somebody in uniform or one of our regular volunteers. They might be able to identify some dangers that are out there. The last tool that you'll use is a weed wrench. So this operates, if you think you can pull it out of the ground and you try and you're unable to, we can give it a shot with this. Essentially, this part of the tool clamps around the base of the trunk of small shrubs and trees. You put your foot on this back pedal here and you pull back on this the handle. So it clamps down and eventually uses some leverage and your body weight to pop it out of the ground. We'll show you when we need to use these. They're pretty easy. You don't want to wrench your back doing this, so make sure you're in a comfortable position. You're on, have good footing, and that you're aware of who's around you again when you're using these. I am going to ask that if this is your first time using any tools like this, that before we get going, you come meet me off to the side, and I'll go a little bit more into depth about how to use the tools. If you've been here a bunch, I know I see a lot of familiar faces today. I feel confident that you know how to use tools safely, so I trust you to do that. Our work area where we're going to be working in, basically bounded by these trails here. See the trail we're standing on? Runs out here to the water. We're going to stay on, this would be the, I guess, southeast side of this trail, more or less, and up and over this hill. So as we get going, we're going to go, we'll identify the plants for you before we get really into things. As we cut and pull things out, we're going to have tarps staged around. I'm going to put you to put all the debris on those tarps, and we're going to drop them off in 2 different debris piles. So there's one over here behind most of the group, and then one down the trail here that has yet to be established, so that the trustees can come in, chip or burn or do whatever to get that munched up and mulched up. Try to stay warm. Pardon me? Poison ivy. There could be some poison ivy. I know there was some. There is some throughout the forest here, but we'll definitely identify it. If you see the key identifying feature of poison ivy in wintertime is if it looks hairy. The roots of the poison ivy vine come out from all parts of the stem. So if it looks kind of like a reddish gray, hairy, either climbing vine or small bush, steer clear of it. So basically just wearing sturdy shoes that have a closed toe, comfortable socks, and comfortable clothes that you don't mind getting a little dirty, because we do get ourselves a little bit dirty in this work. We provide everything else, safe leather gloves to use the tools with, sunscreen, bug spray. We occasionally might run into some poison ivy. We have specialized soap that helps wash that away really quickly. It's trying to find that right combination of protection from things like thorns and brush that we are working in, but also being able to not overheat either.
Well, having done this for 12 years, I basically keep a go bag sitting in my second bedroom. It's got a few things in it, like a D-ring to clip onto here to hold a saw. It's got a spare pair of loppers, which I can slide down into this outside pocket. Yeah, I'm carrying my trusty Leatherman over here. Probably the most important thing I'm going to wear, even though it's wintertime out here, is I'm also carrying my water with me. And that's simply because you don't realize it, but you breathe through your mouth, you talk, you work, you pull, you make an effort. You don't realize you're losing moisture. When you're out here, you need to hydrate on a regular basis.
They are extraordinary about what they provide. There's always water, there's always, when one of the park rangers, Val, comes, she cooks goodies. I brought brownies today. There are always warmers for your hands if you need them. If you're not feeling well or you don't want to work, you only work as hard as you want to. If you need to take a break, you sit down and take a break. There's no pressure, there's no expectations. You just come out here and try to do a good job.
At lunch, I'll reach over and I'll put my coat back on to cut down the windbreak. But now that I'm working, I can work in short sleeves, and it's just being aware of where I'm going, checking the weather before I come out, checking the tides, because we work on islands and peninsulas. So we checked that, yeah, high tide was about 11:30 today, and that means it'll be going down. Shouldn't be an effort, but if we're working down along the water and the tide's coming in, that could be a little bit of a risk or a hazard. Things like that, you learn to kind of look ahead and prepare for it.
Yeah, probably bigger.
We can do that if you like.
Nate's back.
Hey guys.
Hi there.
How's it going? Good.
You know, these parks, the national parks and places like the trustees of reservations properties like here at World's End are important because they essentially belong to all of us, and I think people feel a sense of ownership and they gain a sense of ownership in helping us create the park by volunteering.
I think it's good just for people to work together on a project, and we can see that it's successful. You know, we can see areas where we've worked that the natural plants are returning. Like where I was today, we've worked in this general area before, and I see little holly trees growing, see new cedars growing. So instead of more buckthorn, we're seeing more of the native plants.
Unique habitats are across the board being threatened by development, by pollution, things like that. So working to preserve the spots that we have, that we know are unique, like World's End, it has acres and acres of open grassland bird habitat, as well as these fairly unique zones. Where we are right now is mainly red cedars, which is a fairly unique tree to grow in kind of like an orchard style like this. Essentially maintaining the biodiversity that we have is extremely important, because as you lose it, it becomes more difficult to try and reintroduce more native, indigenous, unique species rather than just keeping and preserving the ones that are already here. It's much more cost effective to use preventative measures than it is to try to go back to what it used to be.
World's End is such an important place, and we might as well try to keep it as pristine and beautiful as possible, and getting rid of the invasives is one way of making sure that the park sustains itself. And it's just being outdoors, there's no pressure, it's doing what you want, it's learning, it's meeting new people. So the whole thing, there's nothing, except for some of the freezing cold days, there is nothing that has a negative to this project. And the history, when you go out to Pettix, people don't understand that Pettix Island was, back in the war, it was an Italian prisoner of war camp. So you have the history of these particular islands that you learn of what was a glue factory, what was a dump, what was factories and buildings and militia. So you end up learning a lot of history at the same time that you're doing some outdoor work.
And you'll notice there's a lot of camaraderie of the people who are working out here today. It becomes a social event for many of us. We know people that are coming out here on a regular basis. We meet new people who come out on a regular basis. And those people are from all walks of life. Attorneys, doctors, plumbers, hand laborers, retired folks like myself. We're all out here sharing the experience. And some come to find out that, you know, hey, we're just human beings to start with. And this takes us back into a natural setting where, hey, we're all at the same level. Hey, give me a hand here, hold this while I cut it, would you? Or can I grab the corner of that tarp and give you a hand carrying it down there? Gives us the opportunity to work together, laugh a little bit, joke a little bit, but it's just an opportunity to say thank you to the people who do come out here. It's wonderful when somebody walks down the trail and says, "What are you folks doing here today? Why are you doing this?" And we have the opportunity to talk to them and explain the importance of keeping the trails open, not only for the deer to run through here, but also so that the people can walk through and see the deer. Occasionally we'll get fortunate, we'll get an article on Chronicle on the TV. Occasionally we'll get an article in the Boston Globe, in the Globe magazine, talking about events, but it's mostly word of mouth. We do maintain a website, www.bostonharborislands.org, and that has a calendar on it. And from that calendar you will see regular listings for Stewardship Saturday. And that's what this event is called today, Stewardship Saturday. We are stewards taking care of our park out here.
And that will give you a listing of the different islands that they're on. In the winter they tend to do World's End and Webb State Park because they are land-based. But the other ones, when you start in the spring and we start in the summer, we go out to the islands and we take a boat. And normally the boat will either leave from Hingham, or during the real summer months it leaves from downtown Boston, either Rose Wharf or down by the Black Falcon Terminal to go out to Thompson's Island. So you can sign up for whatever you want, and you just do the formality of signing up online, and you can have a guest, you can have a couple guests, and then just show up. And it's usually a 9 o'clock start time.
Essentially, this is a really high level of biodiversity, and it's becoming more and more difficult to find around the state. So that's why the trustees exist as an organization, is to preserve these spaces basically in perpetuity as best as we can, and to hold all the land that we have and never develop it. And so that's why World's End is here. World's End actually used to be, it was a proposed site for the UN. They went with New York City instead, which is great because we wouldn't give it up. There were proposed plans for a nuclear power plant out here. And the site itself was actually designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, a relatively famous landscape architect. And he had designed it with the intention of putting housing out here. So we're very fortunate that nothing like that ever happened, and that this is all still managed landscape, and it allows for all of these animals that might not necessarily be able to find another place to, survive and live.